neo-rural, hype or not, welcome to our session. I'm from Özyeğin University, Gastronomy and Culinary Arts Department. This is Candan, Türkkan. We're going to talk about neo-rurality. I mainly study the group who can be considered as fantastic in terms of their demographic properties. I have PhD people, senior executives in multinational companies, people who have had enough of the corporate world and the urban life and who decided to move to rural places. So I study these types of people, and with Emre today we will talk about neo-rural. I think Professor Zafer has already summarized very well the changing dynamics in the rural areas. But we have to say something. As the rural changes, is there a real potential that is being created? Is there any space created for us to rethink certain things in a different way? Or by benefiting from this crisis, so to speak, can we really revisit and rethink this changing rural space and come up with a new space? For those who want to experience and transform the rural space, to what extent is it really open for these differences and changes? These are the things that we will talk about. Would you like to introduce yourself? Yes, this is Emre. I'm an architect at İstinye University, but the reason why I'm here is not because of my academic work, but I have been working for a long time at the Architecture for All Association, and I will share our experience we gained at the association at rural level. And because of my previous work, I'm very familiar with the rural areas of Turkey. We have been carrying out studies almost in all of the villages, even in remote areas. So, okay, let me shoot my first question. I think you are going to talk about the education and structural side of the story, and I will talk about gastronomy and agriculture. So let me ask you the first question. According to you, what is the definition of the neo-rural? Well, it's a difficult definition. Again, based on my background, I can say that, well, yes, as you go back and forth to the rural areas, you come to realize that there is a neo-rural. The new rural is changing, but then initially, when we were going to the rural areas, we wanted to see a space related to nostalgia, like an old place. But now it's like a new scene. But we wanted to see the old picture. And when you go to the rural areas, you face all these harsh realities, depending on the region, of course. The naked truth, as we call it. So it's not that romantic when you go to the rural areas. Because of the processes that we have gone through, because of the approach of the urban to the rural for long years, in a way abusing it. It's like you go out of, you've just seen the movie of the famous director Nuri Bilge Ceylan, and at the end of the movie you feel kind of depressed, you know? So it's always like that when we go to the rural areas, you kind of feel depressed. So people who are somehow unhappy with their own lives and wanted to do something else, want to maybe move to the rural areas. And we have a group of architects who also wanted to come up with a different style of architecture. So we established our association, and people, and these architects, go to the rural areas because they can find better solutions. Sometimes they want to avoid urban conflicts. and they can have architectural practices in a much different way. And if you can translate that to the urban areas, the rural areas, it really creates a learning space for you. Okay, based on that, based on what you've said, I now have two questions in my mind. One is, between the urban and rural, the relationship, how is it changing in the most recent years? I'm not only talking about migration from cities to the villages, but it's a fact that we are now understanding the rural in a totally different way. We are talking about agriculture more, the rural areas more. We're all aware that something is different, something is not going well, but we can't really identify the real problem. Different groups want to go to the rural areas to do different things. And this made me think about the following. How is the approach of urban changing? Because in the past, the rural areas were considered as the areas where the urban area expanded, and the urban areas, the urban always fed itself from the rural, be it in terms of labor, be it in terms of food. So what do you think about all these things? And the other thing that I would like to talk about is that it's much easier to do certain things in the rural areas. Can you please further elaborate on that? Well, the picture is not as romantic as many people tend to think. People have this romantic idea of going to the villages, to the rural areas, and seeing something else. However, when they go there, they really see that it's not much different than the urban space. In the western part, that totally is not the case, but maybe those people who want to go to the rural areas and continue living as if they are still in urban areas, is there such a thing? Maybe. So people want to go to the rural areas because there are certain things that they are not able to do in the urban areas, and they have this sort of dream to move to the rural and be able to do whatever they can't do in urban areas. So in the West, you see more rural areas, but it's also difficult to do certain things in the urban areas. That's why people go to the rural areas. For instance, in urban areas, maybe there are institutions, organizations, public agencies that you think you are more similar to, even though you can't always come to an agreement with these people. There are some problems, but in the rural areas, even with people whom you know to be much different than you from a political perspective, you can communicate with them much easier. For instance, if there is a school that is closed, women want to do something, you need some space, you need a solution, but then you can find it in the rural areas. If your intention is to do something, then you can much easily communicate with people in the rural areas. I'm not suggesting that all the solutions are available in the rural areas. It's easier to solve issues. No, but if you want dialogue, I think you can engage in a dialogue much easier. People can easily set aside their identities and backgrounds and just communicate as human beings. I don't know if I've been able to express myself well.
Now that you mention this, actually I'm a political scientist, and the political scientist in me has been tickled, and I wanted to bring the subject to another dimension. I think you're saying something about the public sphere. It's as if in the city, the state is much more dominant, much more prominent, and it's as if there's more of an intervention. The state is much more present. But when you go to the rural areas, what you see is maybe you have less of a state presence, and then individuals sort of find the middle ground more easily, or maybe they can't, and maybe confrontation becomes much more intense. Well, actually, I'm not so sure about that, but especially after the earthquakes, I mean, we worked in the earthquake zone as well, and in the month of May, I remember really well, we had some needs assessment activities going on, and we were talking to our colleagues here, our friends here, and everyone was trying to do something basically, and people were saying that only the state-sanctioned people would be able to enter these towns, but that's not the case. I mean, that was not the case on the ground. So yes. So what I'm trying to say is, maybe this is what people want it to be like, or expect it to be like, but it's a bit of a duality, I would say, and there may be some state actors who do not want you there, but there's a lot that needs to be done. That has always been the case, and you know, when you make a contribution, they do not say much, and yes, people expect the government to build their homes, rebuild their homes, but it's as if everyone is now building a home wherever they can, as they wait for containers or tents. People are building their own homes, so there's a lot of illegal building going on, and the government knows this. Even the minister himself said there is nothing to be done. So the state is there, but at the same time it's not there. So, and people expect our state, our government to be there, but I mean, everyone is basically left to their own devices. So this is what we are seeing. So in the rural areas, what do you see? Yeah, you see, you have an easier time perhaps seeing or finding a place for yourself. But it's always easy to negotiate. But it depends also. I mean, do we not have this in the city? We do, yes, but in the city, I mean, we have, putting aside other actors, the municipality is an actor on itself, and there are many internal conflicts, and there are many bottlenecks because of that, and that is quite bothersome. Yes. So let's move on. The new rural. What makes it different from the rural of the past? Well, I don't really know much, but about the old, I mean, but I mean, right now there are villages where there are no young people. So how do you revive a school there, right? I mean, and you think that other people would come and do something new. I mean, that's what we try to hope for, and that's what we try to think. But when we go to these places, we see that that's not really possible. So yes, I mean, these projections, like I said at the beginning, are quite linked to the city. In the past, there were some links as well, but yeah, but right now it's much more. So this brings me to romanticizing the rural. Um, I mean, this is something that I see quite often as well. Before immigration, I mean, I talked to a lot of participants, and they said that, I mean, their vision was quite romanticized when it comes to the rural. They felt boxed in the cities. They had work-related problems, health-related problems, and they didn't have access to clean food and food products, and they had a difficult time doing that. And they envisaged a rural space in their head, but that didn't come to pass. When they moved to the rural, once they started living in it, they experienced something different altogether. And here's what I heard from these people in my research. For instance, many people who fled the city to live in the rural, they can never have good relations with the local people, and they have their own farms, but they set up fences, they set up CCTV cameras, they have dogs, right? Because these are quite fierce dogs, like hounds, aggressive dogs for protection, and that's how they train them. So sometimes they use these dogs for hunting as well, but they have these run-ins with people living in the village, in the locals in the region. There are all sorts of arguments, rows. I mean, for instance, cows entering their fields, and that's usually the first step. That's how it begins, and then there's a bit of a negotiation, just like you suggested, and then it doesn't work because there's this economic clash. I cannot make money. How come, as an urban person, come here and build a house here, and when I can't make a living, how come you make a living, make a livelihood? One of the respondents in Mersin said, they shot the dog of the woman who moved there, and so this, and yes, she was able to succeed there because she's quite a warm, affable person. She worked in PR previously. That's why she was able to subsist there, and um, she decided to work with of the sons of the local families, and that's how the relationships improved. So when I listen to these rural stories, I realize this. They romanticize the rural, the city dwellers, and then they experience this harsh reality, and then they simply cannot, um, you know, have good relations with the locals. So this state of confrontation, do you have this in your experience? That's my first question. And secondly, what does it tell us about the new rural? Well, actually, I mean, obviously we don't go and live in the rural, right? On the one hand, we want to be there. Um, we want to be present there. We want to implement things together, and we want to work together. And And because of that, um, we try to find new ways of reconciliation. And even if we go there, we know that, you know, we're sort of guests there. Yeah, at the end of the day, you're a guest. Yes, exactly. It's a significant difference. So you do not have a say about that person. You don't have a claim. You're present, you're there, and you do certain things with them, and then you leave. But once you start living there, everything changes, right? Yes, exactly. So what does this tell us? I mean, Zafer showed us some graphs, you know, aging population and in rural areas, and these people do not really continue their activities of the past, and they're not really open to newcomers either, right? And so it's not a very sweet picture, I should say. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this? Or should we do something about this? Um, can we transform it? If they're so close to newcomers, what are we going to do? And also, the respondents, almost all the respondents I talked to, they do agroecological farming, and some are certified organic, some are not certified organic. They do um, uncertified organic, let's say, and they do not keep the hens in the coop. They're free range, and they feed on whatever is left over in the kitchen, and they're much more compassionate towards animals. But they're not vegans. Um, so on the one hand, when they talk about their neighbors, they say that they're disrespectful towards the nature, towards animals, and between these two sides, newcomers, the highly conscious people versus the locals. There's this tension and there's this disagreement. So, so what can we possibly say about this rural area? Because there is this disconnect between these two populations. What do you say about that? How can they coexist? Well, it's not easy. But maybe when it comes to design and agriculture, I mean, I think there are similar challenges. Um, and and we need more dialogue. I think that is what is needed. We need more dialogue, more recognition, and so yes, these newcomers may implement new practices, but do they really involve the villages there, the local people there? That's also important. Maybe there should be more involvement. I'm sure some people are trying to do it, but as far as I know, that is the case. You know, they go to these rural areas to set up something on their own, and they're not necessarily willing to forge ties with the locals. You gave an example, the lady who recruited a local boy for fertilizer. Yes, I wanted to give you an example. One of the respondents, you know, they go to the village, they purchase land, and before they go, they actually know a couple of people from the village, and one of them is actually their classmate from the uni. Um, um, so they buy the land, and you know they help them buy the land, and they talk about their plans, and then they check a couple of places, and they do end up buying the land, and they settle down in that village. And then what happens is, yes, you know, they're going to do agriculture. They buy animals, um, they get these heirloom seeds, and they're setting out to do agroecological farming. They talk to cooperatives and so on and so forth, but obviously they need labor, and they're not someone who knows agriculture that much. So they say, I'm in a village, I'm surrounded by locals, so let me recruit people from the village. And they start working in the field together. Of course, the newcomer wants to find out the intricacies of farming, and then what happens is incredible. There's this incredible network of gossip. What she wears on that day, and who calls her in the morning, what she has for lunch, all this gossip and recriminations, this and that. And then she goes to the next village, and the third village, it's fine. I mean, it's no longer full of gossip. But what's important is that I listened to similar stories from other respondents, and really, they're all saying that the third village is the best. That is to say, you shouldn't do it in your own village. You should not in the next village, but the village after that. That's how you need to recruit. Find them, recruit them, and then bring them over to your village. That would be the best. Otherwise, many respondents say that within daily life, people work together and rub shoulders, but at the end of the day, at the end of the harvest, let's say olive is harvested, and you're about to turn it into olive oil. There's all these recriminations. You got the better part. You gave me less, and so on and so forth. So there's all these bickering, and this ends up in an impasse. So what I'm trying to say is, there are so many different visions, and working together with that being the case is not so easy. Yes, it's not so easy, and there's always gossip, right? Many places claim to be quite good at gossiping, but I'm going to say the same thing. Yes, there are such people, there will be such people, but yes, it's good intentions perhaps, but they're an employer at the end of the day, and there's not an equal relationship. It's not a commons, or it's not a participatory process. Maybe this is the reason why there are all these disagreements. Yes, you may have good intentions, but you're an employer at the end of the day. So maybe that's where the problem lies, I find. Yes, I think the same. I asked whether they establish cooperatives, do things together, or there are all these models of people you collectively make cheese, and you get a share based on the milk that you put in. And the cooperative stories that I was told were actually much more horrendous. So what I'm trying to say is, basically, as urban dwellers or city dwellers, again, it's us and us versus them, but anyway, us city dwellers, we have this romanticized vision of the rural. But when we start living there, we realize that the actors there, people there, perceive things differently and do things differently, and there's all sorts of tension, and this tension is quite intense. As we romanticize the rural, I think we turn a blind eye to these tensions, and in the absence of that romanticizing, what are we going to do with that rural, right? Why should we go and set up shop there? That is an even more burning question. I cannot answer this question easily, truth be told. If in the rural areas people do not respect their nature or animals, what should we think about them? We would then have every reason to be pessimistic. I don't know if this makes sense, but I live in the city, and I'm not involved in agricultural production, but this is quite difficult as a question, I think. Yes, but us city dwellers, are we really that different from this all? Yes, we live in the city, we're modernized, we like to think we're modernized, but when we go to the rural, we see that there is a tension, but maybe maybe we're not true urban dwellers or city dwellers. I'm not saying, what do you mean we're not? Well, what does it mean to be really urbane? Well, going to the rural, we still have ties with the rural, so maybe we have these images in our heads about the rural domain, and we live in the city, but do we really share things in the city? Do we really protect the nature of the city? Not really. I mean, it's in our nature, you say. Yeah, the cities are not so sensitive either. I mean, the public transportation, this and that, there is a lot of intensity in the city as well, and this reflects on the rural as well. So maybe that's where this tension lies in. Yes, you are a city dweller, but you come from the place that has sort of made things worse for the rural. So yes, you need reconciliation could be possible, but it shouldn't be about recrimination or pointing fingers. I think it is something that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Yes, absolutely, and yes, in the city as well, there's a lot of cruelty. There's a lot of lack of attention and care, and compared to the rural, maybe it's much more intense and much harsher. In terms of ecological damage, for instance. So what are we going to do? That is my question. If the city is like this, if the rural is like that, what are we going to do? If, that there are all these bottlenecks, for instance, public transportation, this and that. I mean, if so many people live in such a small place, then you get these intractable problems, and resource utilization is quite rampant as a result, but at the same time, the same problems may have different results, and then the rural becomes a bit more like the city, and so how are we going to reconstruct this relationship, rebuild this relationship, redress the balance, without being too romantic and without being too frivolous with our resources? How can we conceive a better future? Zafer Hoca showed us this marvelous map. The climate crisis is here. It's not coming, it is here. So what to do?
Yok hakikaten nasıl ama
I don't have an answer to that question. We have to be present both at the rural and at the urban. Yes, sometimes we go there as guests, but maybe we should start as guests, and then if you want to stay there, if you really see yourself there, you can be there, go through all this conflict. We need to tell this to people. I mean, it's not a solution to just withdraw yourself, just thinking it's not possible. Yes, it's difficult to be there, to face these challenges, but we need to somehow do something, right? Because this is a crisis that is growing with the consumption of the city, and we shouldn't run away from responsibility. I just don't have a better answer, and continuity is important also. As a country, we tend to give up on certain things much easily. We want instant solutions. We never find ways to change ourselves, for instance, but rather than that, look for the solution elsewhere. But in such challenging times, economic conditions are there, environmental issues are there. Yes, it's very difficult to do all these things. Although I'm not a pessimistic person, you might easily be drawn into negative ideas. Okay, let's close with this because I want to spare some time for Q&A. Is this a hype or not? Neo-rural, is it hype or not at the end of the day? Well, in what sense hype or not? The existence of it is not a hype. Yes, the neo-rural exists, but is it really that the neo-rural is like a fantasy land where things will be more beautiful? Yes, that's a hype. We need to deal with that to turn that space into a new one. I'm not suggesting that the older version was better, but we need something new, and we don't currently have that new thing. You have to create that thing yourself. You won't find it automatically when you go there to the rural. So can we say that the rural itself is not a hype, but neo-rural is a hype? Yes, maybe we can say so. Okay, nice way of ending. I think now we can open the floor for questions. Are there any questions? Yes, I think here's a question. I saw 2 people raising their hands. There's a question on the app. Let me read that out. People moving from rural to urban areas might also face such adaptation problems. So don't you think that the same things hold true for people who migrate from the rural to the urban? So don't you think it's only natural that people will face problems when they move from the urban to the rural? Well, yes, definitely. Those problems are now a part of our everyday lives. So you don't even consider them as problems, right? In my mind, I don't have a separate register for them. Otherwise, yes, definitely they are facing problems. And at the heart of most of the problems that people face in the urban areas lie the migration from the rural to the urban. As we are not able to manage those problems, it's now a huge issue, right? Yes, yes. Now reverse migration is a new situation, but it's also problematic. Hello. I have a question related to the previous session as well, so Professor Zafer can also answer. He showed us a graph. The farmers learn from the other farmers in the rural areas when it comes to production dynamics, the ancient wisdom. To what extent these new farmers are integrated in those conventional practices? I'm not interested in the fact that whether they are engaged in organic agriculture or not, because the farmers, peasants in Anatolia are not able to carry out organic farming activities because of certain restrictions, but natural production, let's say, to what extent is it critical for the new farmers? To what extent they are able to become a part of this process? Are they at all involved in this process? This is a difficult one to answer. It's a difficult question because we need to make the differentiation in some parts. Let me try to answer it. Well, the graph that Professor Zafer showed us did not clearly illustrate what exactly it was that the farmers learned from other farmers. Or am I wrong? We can't hear the speaker. They are not using the microphone. In my field study with my interviewees, what I learned was that the farmers already have information on natural farming and agricultural activities. They both have the seeds and the information. They know different methods of following up seasonal changes, and when the seasons change, they know if there will be enough precipitation or not, or they know the techniques to fight against pests, for instance, but somehow the information is not passed on to the next generations because of the type of farming that the new generation is engaged in. They don't need such information. They use the seeds that they purchase from a company. They use the fertilizer that the same company is selling. They ask the company people when to irrigate the produce, when to fertilize. They receive an SMS. If they have a good yield, that's fine. If not, they say, okay, this year was a loss. The new farmers or villagers, as I call them, when they come, they establish relations with the older generations. They learn the natural agricultural practices from them and start implementing them. This might be organic farming as well. if we are going to make a difference than natural agriculture. Organic is more monoculture. You can only produce one type of crop. But the older generations always tell you should have multiple crops. Plant this next to that, plant that as well. So they have the wisdom to keep different crops in the same area. But they mainly learn from the older generations. So the natural farming is mainly carried out by new farmers. The locals over there, the active generation, is not really interested in this because the yield is not that high. So they cannot make money. So they have to either increase the price, which is not accepted by the market, or they have to sell it directly to the consumer, for which they don't have the channels because they don't create such channels. That being the case, they don't go into that business at all. Another finding I came up with in the study is that maybe they're not doing it themselves, but there is somebody else in that village engaged in organic farming. Why don't you switch to that? There are people explaining you things about good farming practices. Why don't they use those practices? Because at the end of the day, it's always related to social cost. It's too costly. The farmers are in certain social circles. They know the fertilizer person. When they sit at the village cafe, they discuss the price of maize, for instance. But if they switch to organic farming, they will have to leave those circles, those networks, and shift to another one, and it comes with a cost. And most of the time, this is exactly what prevents them from doing so. They think they will no longer be able to go to the village coffee house and discuss with other farmers. They won't go to the agriculturist's office and drink tea with him and discuss these things. This needs a change in the dynamics, and they don't want to change those dynamics. They're not open to change. Yes, this is Antakman. We live in an Aegean village with a population of 251 people. 251, you mean? Yes, 251, 251 people. We are engaged in architectural activities in the village. We run an institute. We live in that village. We don't have another house. And that's our shelter. That's our house. I think there is a big difference there. We use our right for accommodation over there. We don't have another house. And we have very good friendly relations with the villagers. We're not farmers. We're not engaged in animal husbandry. We are only involved in agriculture, architecture, but we never pretended to be superior than the villages. That's why we have wonderful conversations with everyone in the village. My question, one is about the right to accommodation, because when you work as an architect in the rural areas, this is a big problem we face. People say you have a house in Istanbul, a summer house in Bodrum, and you come here 2 or 3 months a year to experience the rural life. You occupy agricultural land there. No, I say, don't do this. The second or third housing, what do you think on this, having multiple houses? The second question is, we always talk either about the rural or the urban, as if it's either black or white, but there are so many gray areas in between. For instance, small towns. In Germany, that's a development model they pursued. Developed town models is the basis of their entire development model. So why are we discussing these issues only within the framework of the cities or the villages? Maybe we can also think about small towns that are located in between in terms of their sizes. I agree. You said you never got involved in agricultural activities. You continue to practice your own profession. You are an architect in the village as well. I think this is the critical aspect. Just get involved in agricultural activities and let's talk again in a few years, regardless of the crop that you will cultivate. I think that's a major difference. When you start to compete with them in their own field, which is agriculture, things really change drastically. I've learned important mechanisms of sabotaging people's work. I saw this, farmers and villagers coming and putting salt to a newcomer's land. They cut the water, they stop somehow the water pipes going to the fields, or just the opposite. They just pump water in it, killing everything in the field. Can you imagine? We have the climate crisis, there's water scarcity, and they're just like flooding other people's fields. Unbelievable. But I can't tell you enough how much I agree with you in terms of the towns. I think the solution is not in the cities, it's not in the villages, but it's in the towns. We carried out an interesting study for the Ministry of Industry. We have about 900 towns in Turkey, and we have 9,000. And we have identified the towns with a population of more than 2,000 but less than 10,000. We took a random sample for 40 towns to see the socio-economic situation in these towns, and we had an analysis. And we realized something, that there are four main sectors: industry, or let's call it production, services, of course, agriculture, and what was the fourth one? It says petit bourgeoisie, small shopkeepers or craftsmen, something like that. Another interesting thing was that for these four main sectors that the data indicated, we classified the districts, the towns. And then we said, if a district, a town, is in the same percentile in all sectors, then this could be considered as a resilient town. Then we analyze these resilient ones in closer detail. By the way, I'm not saying developed, I'm saying resilient, resilient against economic crisis. And we've really realized that if they're all in the same percentiles, then the households in those towns include different individuals from different sectors. One person in the family works in the agricultural sector, the other one works in a bank, the other one, for instance, is in tourism. So if there is an economic crisis in any sector, and if one of the household members loses their jobs, thanks to the other members who are in the other sectors, they can still make their living. Then infrastructure is much easier to access. The school is very close by. Children can go to the school easily. They are close to the hospital. They're close to their work. Women have much more spare time. So there is really a change, a transformation. So the town is really a solution. In terms of data, it's very clear. If you write Kırkep, that's the name of the study, Kırkep, you can find the report. How many resilient towns did you find in Turkey? That's interesting. In our sample, out of the 100 towns we analyzed, a great number was resilient, but there's something interesting. Being underdeveloped might also help you to be more resilient, so we need to think them separately. We need to create a matrix there, I think. Okay, I won't go into the details. Yes, the towns might also be a very gloomy places. it's like somewhere in between a town and a village. But maybe we need to transform our towns as well, small towns. That definitely, it goes without saying, that's true. But I have to say that for many women, if they can't make it in the city, they can at least make it in the small towns. But of course, the structure of the town is also important. But okay, let me leave it here. Hello. I think it's a great topic for brainstorming, but based on your examples, I think it's all about personalization. When it comes to agriculture, for instance, we have the reality of agriculture being massacred by the hand of the state. For instance, the issue with pesticides is not something related to the farmers, but it's really imposed by government policy to people. So from that perspective, it's really indicating that it's about the government. It's not a lifestyle, it's not a personal choice, because since the 1980s there has been this policy that is being implemented. I think we need more sensible policies. And when it comes to small towns, with the most recent law that has been enacted, most of the villages have received town status. I think that's ridiculous. The government has to solve this problem, and through certain initiatives from the field, we need to contribute to the government. Thank you. I just want to add on to what you have said. Maybe I will act as the devil's advocate, because this is really a challenging topic. You said agriculture being massacred by the hand of the government. I totally agree, by the way. But when we take a different approach, when we consider things from a different perspective, we know that yes, the agricultural sector has really been massacred by the government, and the villagers, the farmers themselves know this, and they're totally okay with this. That's the ridiculous part. People are okay with it. So if these people are rational people, it means that they also think that agriculture should no longer be there. No, but you need to make the agricultural sector attractive so that people will become farmers. No, we're talking about an entire sector here when we say, but the same thing holds true for IT. We're talking about agriculture 4.0. It shouldn't be the job of the government to make any sector attractive. No. I said I'm acting as the devil's advocate. I'm trying to say it because from what I see in the field, if the farmers themselves were happy with it, why would the government try to incentivize people anyway in the first place?
Gelen var, onlar yapacak. Çünkü onların
So this is what needs to be addressed. People coming from the cities, the agricultural activities that they do, it leads somewhere. We haven't talked about that today, and I didn't bring in the data, but in exportation, I think they're making substantial progress. They freeze blueberries and export it to Finland, or they directly bring it to the consumer. They're using all these methods. So if there are aging populations in villages, if they do not want to do agriculture, then the state should incentivize others, newcomers, so that they can carry out these agricultural activities. So I think this is an important point as well. Yes, I'm not against that at all. I'm just saying that there needs to be a better governance here. Yes. Yes, our time is up. All right, we need to adjourn the session. Thank you very much. Just one additional comment. The state, are they saying if you don't want to do it, don't come? Or are they saying if you can't compete, don't come? Or is there a difference in between the two in the neoliberalist approach? I think there is. I don't think there is. Thank you very much. here's my question. We talked about city rights, but we didn't talk about rural rights. What would you say about that discussion? City dwellers also want to experience the rural in the city. They have allotments, this and that. What could we say about that? That is my question. The debate. That's my first question. And the second question was about shared concerns. Both parties, how can they possibly reconcile? And maybe concerns, shared concerns can bring these people together, right? Yes, newcomers are transforming these spaces, but they also have a stake in the game, so to speak. So what would you say about this? Thank you. Those are my two questions. Shared concerns, what would you say? Yeah, I wanted to say about something about awareness. What am I doing in the city? What am I doing in the rural areas? What does this mean? We need to be cognizant of that. I believe that is the answer to this question. Yes, I tend to disagree about rights because, because I'm a political scientist by nature. When you talk about rights, there's a claim vis-à-vis the state. You say, this is by legislation, this is my right. It's a legitimate right that needs to be enforced, right? This is my space, you say. But the lady said, if the state is in this way, I do not want this right. Then this leads us somewhere else, and I'm not okay with that. And also yet another problem when we adopt a rights-based approach, rights can be taken away at some point in the future. As women, I think we are experiencing this, right? I mean, people are meddling with civil law, and then we all stand to suffer as a result, right? So that's the problem you encounter when you talk about rights or base things on rights. So I'm at a distance when it comes to right to water, right to the city. Of course, these are good ideas. I'm not trying to say that, but we cannot entirely rely on rights because I do not believe in or trust the government, simply. So should we adjourn the session? Okay, the time is up, so we need to adjourn the session. Thank you very much. You feel free to speak during the break. Thank you. Session adjourned. Thank you. Goodbye.